I should have walked away the moment she opened the door. That's what I tell myself now. But the truth is, I couldn't. Her brother had called me that afternoon, asking if I could stop by and help with a busted kitchen cabinet. I almost said no, I had work, deadlines, excuses. Then he mentioned it was at his sister's place. For some reason, I agreed before I even thought about it. And now here I was, standing in her doorway, trying not to look like a kid in over his head. She wasn't what I expected. Older, yes, mid-40s maybe, but not in the way that makes people fade into the background. She carried herself differently, like someone who'd lived through things, mistakes and all, and somehow wore them like a kind of strength. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Her voice was calm, confident. Too confident. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish, like she'd tried to make it presentable but hadn't quite finished. Sunlight fell across the wooden floor, catching in her hair, dark, with strands of silver that didn't make her look old, only sharper. "The cabinet's over there," she said, pointing with a slight flick of her wrist. I nodded, setting my bag of tools down, grateful to have something to do with my hands. For a while, we didn't talk. I crouched, pretending to study the broken hinge like it was life or death. She moved around the kitchen, too slowly, like she wanted to appear busy but had nothing to do. I could feel her presence behind me. Close, then farther away, then close again. "You didn't have to come," she said finally. "I could have managed." Her tone was light, but something underneath it made me pause. I glanced up. She was leaning against the counter, arms folded, watching me like she wasn't sure whether to thank me or send me out the door. "I didn't mind," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She gave a small smile. "You sound like your father. Always so sure of yourself." That caught me. I wasn't sure if it was meant as a compliment or a warning. The silence after that stretched, filling the kitchen like a weight. I focused on the hinge again, but my hands moved slower, clumsier. The air felt warmer. When the cabinet finally held steady, I tested it twice, 3 times, just to avoid standing up too soon. When I did, she was still there, still watching. "Thank you," she said. This time her voice softened. I nodded, but my throat had gone dry. I couldn't think of a reply. Her eyes held mine a little too long. That was the first moment, the one that made everything shift, even if neither of us said it out loud. A gaze that lingered, not just polite or grateful, but searching. I broke it first, looking down, fumbling with my tools. My hands brushed the countertop where hers rested. Skin against skin, just for a second, but long enough that neither of us pulled back right away. The air between us stilled. Then, quietly, almost like she was daring herself, she whispered, "I'm not innocent anymore." The words hung there, heavier than anything I could fix with a screwdriver. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about a broken cabinet at all. Her words, "I'm not innocent anymore," kept replaying in my head like an echo that wouldn't fade. I wanted to ask what she meant, but my throat refused. I just stood there, fingers still brushing the counter where hers had been, until she pulled her hand back first. She turned away, reaching for her mug on the sink, and for the first time I noticed her shoulders weren't as straight as they'd looked at the door. There was a curve in them, a tiredness she hadn't shown before. Dangerous, I thought. This was dangerous. Not because of what she said, but because I suddenly wanted to know everything behind it. I busied myself by packing my tools, sliding the screwdriver too hard into the bag so it clinked against the others. I told myself to just leave, thank her, walk out, pretend nothing had happened. Instead, I said, "So, it wasn't just the cabinet, was it?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. She froze, mug in hand. Her eyes flicked up at me, guarded. For a second, I thought she might laugh it off. But she didn't. "It's been a hard year," she said finally. Her voice was quieter now, stripped of the confidence she'd used when I arrived. "Harder than I like admitting." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to ask more. What happened? Who hurt her? Why she looked like she hadn't slept properly in weeks. But I stayed silent. And in that silence, I noticed things I hadn't before. The faint bruise-colored circles under her eyes, the chipped polish on her nails, the way her mug trembled just slightly in her hand. She wasn't untouchable. She wasn't the version of her I'd built in my head when my friend first mentioned her. She was human, breakable. And that made it worse because I wanted to be the one she didn't have to hide that from. You don't have to explain, I said, softer than I intended. Her lips curved into something like a smile, but not quite. You're too young to say things like that, she murmured. Maybe she was right, but the way she looked at me when she said it, like she was testing me, daring me, made my pulse hammer in my chest. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to glance at the door. I should probably head out? I waited for her to agree, to let me escape before I crossed a line I couldn't take back. But instead, she stepped closer. Not much, just enough to blur the air between us. Her hand brushed against my arm, light at first, then firmer, like she needed to know I was solid, real. Stay a little longer, she said. It wasn't a question. My bag of tools hung heavy in my hand, but I didn't move. Not toward the door, not away from her. I just stood there, caught between the voice in my head telling me to leave, and the quiet pull in her eyes asking me to stay. Her hand was still on my arm, warm through the fabric of my shirt, when she exhaled slowly. That single touch had already tilted the ground beneath me, but the quiet way she looked at me then, that almost undid me. I shouldn't ask you to stay, she whispered. But the house. It feels too empty when it's just me. Her honesty startled me. It wasn't the kind of thing people admit out loud, not to someone like me. My throat tightened. I should have said something casual, a joke maybe, anything to take the weight out of her words. Instead, I just nodded because walking away felt impossible. She poured another cup of coffee and set it in front of me, though she didn't ask if I wanted one. I sat at the table, watching the way her hands lingered against the mug, fingers tracing the rim. She didn't drink. She just sat across from me, eyes darting to mine, then away, as if she wasn't sure how much she'd already revealed. You ever feel like you missed your chance? She said suddenly. I blinked. Chance at what? She gave a short, nervous laugh. Everything. Her voice cracked on that word. For a moment, she wasn't the confident woman who'd opened the door earlier. She was fragile, and it made me want to reach across the table, take her hand, tell her she hadn't missed anything at all. But my hand just twitched uselessly against the wood. Before I could answer, her phone rang. The sharp sound cut through the silence like a blade. She didn't move right away, almost as if she hoped the call would stop on its own. Didn't. Finally, she grabbed it and turned slightly away from me. Yes, she said, her tone instantly firmer, professional. She listened, nodding. I caught fragments, something about work, about schedules. Her back was straighter, her voice steadier, as though she could slip back into that controlled version of herself whenever she needed to. But when she hung up, she didn't move right away. She stayed facing the window, shoulders tight. You okay? I asked softer than I meant to. She glanced back, and for the first time that day, her eyes glistened. It's exhausting, she admitted, pretending all the time. The confession lingered between us. I rose from the chair before I even thought about it, moving closer. Too close. She didn't step back. My hand brushed her sleeve, just a touch, meant to comfort. But neither of us moved away. The air was so thick with what we weren't saying that it felt like one breath could tip it all over the edge. I started voice breaking. She looked up at me then, her lips parting slightly, as if daring me to finish. I didn't, because in that moment, it felt like the only thing standing between us and crossing the line was a single heartbeat. I should have stepped back. I should have grabbed my tools, mumbled an excuse, and left. Instead, I stayed where I was, too close, too aware of the way her breath brushed the space between us. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she murmured. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. I swallowed hard. "Like what? Like you're waiting for me to do something I shouldn't." The words landed heavy, but she didn't move. If anything, she leaned in the smallest bit closer. Her honesty burned, and I couldn't look away. "I'm not," I started, then stopped, because lying felt pointless. My voice lowered, almost a confession. "I can't seem to stop." Her eyes flickered, searching mine, as if trying to decide whether to push me away or pull me in. Her lips parted like she might speak, but nothing came out. Instead, her hand lifted, almost unconsciously, and hovered at my chest. She didn't touch me, just stayed there, fingers trembling inches from my shirt. I thought my heart might tear itself out of me. "You're too young," she whispered, the words shaking now. "And I'm too broken." Something raw cracked in her voice, and that nearly undid me more than her nearness. She wasn't the composed, unreachable woman anymore. She was exposed, confessing the very thing she wanted to keep hidden. I forced myself to breathe. "You're not broken," I said. "You're the only person in this house who feels real." That was too much. I knew it the second it left my mouth. Her hand dropped, and she stepped back just slightly, like she needed space to breathe. But her eyes stayed locked on me. The silence between us throbbed. Heavy, fragile, dangerous. Then she shook her head, a bitter little laugh escaping. "You don't know what you're saying." But I did, and the way my chest ached told me she knew it too. I took a step toward the door, trying to give her the out she clearly wanted. Even if I didn't. My hand touched the strap of my tool bag. "Maybe I should." "Don't." The word cut sharper than I expected. I froze. She took a step closer again, her breath uneven, her expression caught between fear and need. Her eyes softened, then hardened, then softened again, as though she couldn't decide which truth to let me see. "Do you have any idea?" she whispered. "How long it's been since someone made me feel seen?" Her voice cracked on that last word, and it hit me like a punch. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because there it was, laid bare, trembling in the air between us. We stood locked in silence, staring at each other, the question unspoken but loud enough to drown the room. Were we about to cross the line? The silence between us was so thick it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. One step closer, and we'd be past the point of no return. Then, out of nowhere, she whispered, "You remind me of him." The words jolted me. "Who?" She pressed her lips together, as though she hadn't meant to say it aloud. Her hand gripped the edge of the counter. "Your father." My stomach dropped. I hadn't expected that. The room seemed to tilt, everything shifting under the weight of that revelation. My father. Her tone wasn't casual, wasn't harmless. It was layered with memory, regret, something unfinished. "You knew him?" I asked, though my voice came out sharper than I intended. She closed her eyes for a beat. "We were close. Once. Before you were born. Before everything." A rush of heat and confusion shot through me. My father had never mentioned her. Not once. And now here she was, standing in front of me, her eyes shimmering with things I couldn't name. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" My words tumbled out too fast, too raw. "Because it was complicated," she said, shaking her head. "Because he chose another life. And I pretended I was fine with it, until I wasn't." The air thickened again, but differently now. Less about desire, more about something dangerous and unfinished. I stepped back, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "So what is this, then? Am I just, what? A reminder?" Her face flinched, pained. "No, don't say that." I wanted to believe her, but the truth burned in my chest. "You just compared me to him." She moved forward, desperate now. "Because I'm afraid. Because when I look at you, it feels like history repeating, and I don't know if I can survive that again. The confession cracked something open in me. For a moment, I didn't see her as the untouchable woman I shouldn't want. I saw her as someone who'd carried regret for decades, someone terrified of reaching for something real, only to lose it again. And suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just there, with her. I reached out, without thinking, and covered her trembling hand with mine. Then don't push me away. I'm not him. I don't want to be him. Her breath caught, her eyes flickering with something between hope and fear. But before either of us could say another word, the sound of a car door slammed outside. The unmistakable shuffle of footsteps followed, moving up her front walk. She stiffened. It's my brother, the one who'd sent me here in the first place. Her hand gripped mine tighter for one brief, panicked moment, then let go. And in that silence, hearts pounding, we both knew. The secret between us wasn't going to stay hidden much longer. The sound of footsteps outside grew heavier, closer. She backed away from me, her whole body tense like a cornered animal. For a moment, I thought she'd send me out the back door, pretend none of this ever happened. But then she stopped, pressing her palms flat against the counter. Her breathing was uneven. I can't do this, she whispered. Not again. Not with someone who... She cut herself off, biting down on the words. I stepped closer, voice low but steady. Not with someone who what? Reminds you of him. Her eyes flashed to mine, sharp and desperate. Yes, and no. You're not him. But you make me feel the way he once did. And that terrifies me. The honesty landed like a blow. But I didn't flinch. Couldn't. Because beneath her fear, there was something else. Something that had been pulling us both closer since the moment I walked in. The knock came then. 3 sharp raps at the door. Her brother's voice followed. Hey, you still there? Everything okay? We froze. The house was so silent. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. She didn't answer. Neither did I. She turned toward me instead, eyes locked on mine, and for the first time since this all began, she stopped hiding. The walls she'd built around herself cracked wide open. I don't want to regret this, she whispered. Her voice shook. I've lived half my life carrying regrets. I can't add another. Something in me snapped then, not in anger but in clarity. I reached out, cupping her face gently, forcing her to look at me. Then don't. Stop pretending this isn't real. Stop pushing me away because of him. I'm not him. Her lips parted, trembling under my touch. I could feel her hesitation, her need, her fear all colliding at once. And for the first time, she didn't run from it. The knock came again, louder this time. You need anything? Should I come in? She let out a shaky breath, closing her eyes just for a second. When they opened again, they were wet but steady. She leaned into my hand, just barely, as though giving herself permission to want this. No, she called out, her voice stronger than I expected. I'm fine. I'll call you later. The silence after her brother's footsteps retreated was deafening. She turned back to me, a wry, broken smile tugging at her lips. Well, she whispered, I guess there's no going back now. I didn't answer with words. I just stayed there, holding her, both of us trembling with the weight of what we'd chosen. Not perfect, not clean, but real. For the first time, she wasn't hiding, and I wasn't pretending. And whatever came next, we'd face it together. After her brother's footsteps faded down the walk, the house sank into silence again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier, steadier, filled with everything we'd admitted, everything we couldn't take back. She was still leaning into my hand, her eyes searching mine like she was trying to see if I'd vanish, or if I'd stand firm. I didn't move. I wanted her to know I wasn't going anywhere. Finally, she pulled in a long, shaky breath. I never thought I'd let myself want something like this again. Her voice cracked a little, but she didn't look away. I told myself those parts of me were gone, buried. But you, she paused, swallowing. You made me remember I'm still alive. Hearing her say that felt like a blade and a bomb all at once. I'd wanted her from the start, yes, but more than that, I wanted her to believe she deserved to be wanted. You don't have to carry all that regret anymore, I said softly. Not alone. Not if you don't want to. Her lips pressed together, trembling, and then, finally, she leaned in. Not rushed, not reckless. Just slow, careful, as though she was giving herself permission with each breath. And when her lips met mine, it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a perfect movie moment. It was real, unsteady, raw, and it meant more than any fantasy ever could. When we finally broke apart, she kept her forehead against mine, whispering, "Promise me you won't disappear." I couldn't take that again. I closed my eyes, pressing her hand to my chest so she could feel the certainty in my heartbeat. I'm here, and I'm not him. This is ours. The weight she'd been carrying seemed to ease, if only slightly. Her smile was small, fragile, but it was real, the kind of smile you only give when you've decided to trust again. In that moment, I knew we hadn't just crossed a line. We'd built something new, dangerous, maybe complicated, definitely, but real, something worth holding on to. Because she wasn't the woman I thought she was when I first walked through that door. She wasn't untouchable, untarnished, unreachable. She was flawed, she was scarred, and she was herself. And somehow, impossibly, she had chosen me.